Hey guys, it's Lisa and welcome to my channel. Today we're going to work on some scrap wood. And I have all these scrap wood pieces in my stash, and some of them I've started as pumpkins, some of them I've just base painted for whatever. I'm not sure what I was going to do with them, but I got behind and I haven't went back to those for a while, so I'm just going to go ahead and finish them. This one I'm just going to go ahead because it's got that hole in the top for the stem. I'm going to go ahead and make a pumpkin on this one. And this is a transfer from Dixie Belle called High Pumpkin. And it has this along with some other colors. And I think I did one of them in the last video. And I'm just going to transfer this to the front of this block of wood that I've already painted and distressed. Now this was just 2x6, I think, and I've just cut it in lengths and again just drilled that hole in the top for the stem. Now I had a viewer ask for more voicing during the process rather than voiceovers, and I actually tried that on this one, but I ran into too many problems, so I'm hoping soon to be able to do another one of those and to start fitting more of those in. It is a little harder to do because if things are going on around you, then you get those in your video and maybe don't want them, and maybe you're working on a step that doesn't need to be left out when that happens. So it's a little harder, but I do want to do more of that. It's also, for me, hard right now because of the way I'm having to do my crafting with the injury. And where I'm crafting right now is in my dining room, and the way I need to set my camera up, the speaker is just way too close to me, so it gets like cutting this packet open of this drawer pull would be so loud, and it almost seems like it's even louder than my voice. So just didn't work on this one, but I will try on the next one. Now, because this is a hole here and I'm not going to stick this drawer pull down in the hole, I'm just going to go ahead and fill it with glue. And it just then it's just going to sit right down on top of that. My intention was to get this completely full so that it made contact with my drawer pull, and you actually need to kind of fill it to heaping, which for you guys you're not going to have this issue because most likely you're not going to have that hole in the top anyway. So there's where I realized it didn't get enough contact, and then I just went ahead and squirted some down in the inside the drawer pull, and that will give it better contact anyway because it will be down in that little hole in the drawer pull and then make contact with that. So I don't think that's going anywhere. Now if you watched my last video, you know I used that drawer pull or one like it on in my last video, but this one's my last one, and although I didn't put anything around the pull on the last one, I am going to put a little something around this one because I feel like it still needs more. But I'm not going to do too much because I don't want to hide that. Again, it has kind of a short profile, so it would be easy to hide. But I'm just going to glue some little leaves and things like that around the top to dress this up. Now I do want to take a minute to tell you guys how very, very much I appreciate you. I've had so many changes with this channel, and you guys have been patient so much through everything that I've had going on, and I just can't thank you enough for supporting me. I know that I've been a little hard to support lately, but I do so appreciate your watching and all your sweet comments and just sticking with me. I appreciate that so much. One of my favorite projects is scrap wood projects, and of scrap wood projects, just taking little blocks and and just making whatever I want to make out of them is my favorite. So these are just ones I've had in my stash, and I need to get them out of my way and turn them into something sellable. And so I can just take each one and look at it and decide at the time what it says to me. And as crafters, I'm sure many of you know what I'm talking about. It's just so enjoyable to create what you feel like creating. I was hoping to put some little berries in that, in this, but couldn't find the right color. In hindsight, I probably should have just painted some berries, but I end up just putting some pine cones instead. I didn't mention that although this was already base coated, after I put the transfer on there, it had to be sealed. So I just took some clear coat from Dixie Belle. I think I used a satin finish on these, because even if your paint is sealed, that transfer also needs to be sealed. My next project is another block of wood, and this one has been cut to where the bottom is the long end. And I guess I was going to do a shorter pumpkin on this one, I'm not sure. But this one is a Dixie Belle transfer also, and it is called Cardinals. And so I'm going to, although I'm not real big on red myself, really I'm not that big on cardinals, but there is a meaning behind them. I'm told that it is a spiritual meaning having to do with a loved one that is passed on. So there's a lot of people who do enjoy these birds. And this transfer also has the pine cone with the pine needles, and I really like the look of that, and also these little poinsettias. Again, I'm not a big fan of poinsettias. I think they're really pretty, but they just don't last very long, and again, the red is just not my thing. Now I'm going to use this longer pine cone transfer here and put this on the bottom of the block. Now, I don't know if you guys have a source for these little pieces of wood, but I know in my area there's subdivisions going up everywhere, and if you stop and talk to the workers, they're usually throwing bits and pieces of wood in the yard to take off, or to put in the dumpster on site later. And so if you ask them, every time we've asked, they've always been happy for you to just pick them up and take them. So a lot of times those are already cut up. So likely you can do these little projects without having any money to speak of in them. Now I want to add one of these cardinals, and what I'm going to do is kind of layer it over the top of this, because obviously it's not going to fit. And with transfers, I just really like the look of layering them. Then you will have something that is completely different than what other people have, because not likely they're going to place them the same way you do. But I just really like the layered look. Now obviously you need to put something darker over the back. You don't need to try to put a lighter transfer over a dark transfer. That may not work so well, but with this it worked fine. So now I want to take some little bits of greenery and make a spray for the top of this one. Now this particular greenery here, I'm going to look for it. It kind of mimics that pine on the bottom. I'm not sure if I ordered this from Amazon or if it came in some greenery that my sister found. But again, I will look for that and link anything that I can find in the description. But I'm just going to glue this, and I'm using a lot of glue. I don't mind having that little pool of glue there on the top, because it's going to be all hidden with embellishment. Now this greenery here I use all the time, and my sister did find this one at a thrift store, and it was a very large bag of this, and so I've gotten so much use out of it and still have so much more left. But the very ends of it is this lighter green, and then the darker green is on the other side. And I like to tear these instead of cutting them because then they have a much more natural look. But they're just so good to work with, and I think they have such a realistic look to them. The pine needles, maybe not as much. I would like some variation in the color, and I could have added some variation in the color just by dry brushing some paint over the top. But I'm adding all this other greenery instead, and it will make it give it a better look. Now this little piece here, I like this, but it is, again, not the most realistic. So paired with the other ones, it will look a lot better. And that's the thing, and I've said it before, you can take greenery that is not very natural looking and put it with some that is, and that will distract from the one that isn't so realistic. And so a lot of times that works, and you'll still have an arrangement that looks more high-end versus just something that you would just get at the Dollar Tree or something like that. Now this is one that I took off an ornament. I think it was on the video that where I made over some Walmart ornaments, and so I'm just going to take that piece and glue it in the center there. And then I'll add a few more little berries and pine cones. And then I had this little bow that I also took off one of the Walmart ornaments. And it's just a little simple plaid bow. And I'm just going to add that to one side of it, and that will finish this off. And now for the next block, I'm going to add this napkin. And I did get this one from Amazon, so I will link this in the description. But I'm just pulling off one ply, the ply that obviously that has the printed design on it. And now I'm gonna glue this all the way around, and I'm just gonna use some matte finish Mod Podge. And this won't reach all the way around, so I'm gonna start on this back corner and cover that side, the front, and the other side. And then I'm going to cut it there and then piece that back. So I could cut this to fit the block, but I want to make sure that that it does fit and I'm not short. So what I'm going to do is just go ahead and glue this without cutting it. And this is just one side of the napkin is what I'll use on this, and then I'll use the other side of the napkin to piece that back. But if you just start here on the very bottom, then you can just cut your excess off the top. And even better than that, when you put your top coat on, then you can make sure that you wet those edges well, and just pull against the edge, not away from, but against the edge, and it will tear right off where you need it to tear off. And if you need to neaten that up afterwards, you can just use your little finger sander and neaten that up when it's dry. Which makes napkins very, very easy to work with, except that they are very fragile. So once you wet them, you have to be very careful not to tear them. So when you're doing your strokes, don't get too heavy-handed and put too much pressure on that, because it will tear your design. So I did go over the whole thing after I glued that on with another coat of the Mod Podge. And here I'm piecing that back with the other side of the napkin. And then while I wait on this one to dry, I'm going to go ahead and start the next one. Now for this one, it's just been stained with some watered down paint. And this is just a little section of a landscaping timber. So these are very easy to get, very cheap, and you can get so many out of just one landscaping timber. So as you can see, I've kind of sanded that top because that was going to be the top. I think maybe this one was going to be a pumpkin also, but I didn't sand the bottom. Now I'm also going to put a cardinal on this one. And instead of just making a sign on this one, my first thought was to use this as a riser, and it would make a cute little candle riser or a riser for just about anything. But I think what I want to do on this one is add a nest on the top. So I'm going to put this little cardinal on here, and I was worried that it may not show up well enough, but it does. It shows up fine on here, and I'll just add some other little touches to lighten it even more. So I found a little nest that I want to add to this, and it had these little eggs on it, which I'm not crazy about the color of. I started to paint them before I put them in the nest, but if I go ahead and put them in the nest, it'll be a lot easier for me to paint. I may not be able to get underneath that well, but I'm going to add some other little touches inside to hide that anyway. And if I get any paint, which I will, on the nest itself, I can also hide that. But what I wanted for this was eggs that look like cardinal eggs, and I wasn't sure what they look like, so I looked them up, and this is what they look like. And it should be simple enough. All that I need to do then is just paint them white and put some little brown specks on them. So I base coated these white. One coat was enough because I'm going to be adding all those little specks to it. And where it didn't cover the best, it won't even be noticeable. So I'm just giving these one coat of the color cotton. And I realized in painting these that using a little sponge was so much better than trying to brush it on. Then I took some watered down dark brown paint. This is coffee bean, but any dark brown will do. And I just mixed it with about half water and just flicked that on the eggs until I was happy with the look. Now I love how this little nest is made because it's got that little, almost like a little grapevine thing that hangs off. And that's going to give me something to not only add a little bit of character there to the top, but to glue onto the surface around the sides so that it stays even better. So I want this leaning forward, and that's going to really help me to keep it leaning forward. So I just watched where that was on against the board and added glue there, and then held that in place. And then I also added some glue around the front and obviously underneath the nest. Then I just started adding some greenery around where the grapevine was, and this is some more of the greenery that my sister got at a thrift store for me. And I like it because I like the soft color, but also it's going to add a Christmassy touch to this. But again, this won't be limited to Christmas because it can just be a winter decor. So I just kept adding this greenery around the edges, and then once I got some on all sides, then I added some Spanish moss down inside the nest around the eggs, and then put some little frosted berries so that it would bring the red from the cardinal up to the nest. And then I took a little bit of paint on my brush and just started dabbing it here and there all over the nest. And that lightens this nest up and gives it more of a snowy, Christmassy look. And then it also I'll use this same paint to lighten the base somewhat. So in order to do that, all that I did was where I'm using more paint here on my brush, I just used my brush afterwards and just dry brushed with what was left on the brush onto some of the high spots in my little wood piece. And before my brush was dry, I dabbed some around the bottom, and this will just kind of look like snow piled up. Now, the only reason I'm doing the white first, I'm going to be using some Epsom salts on this to create more of a snow look. But before I do that, I need to put a little bit of white under there so that the snow will actually show up. So once this white was on here and I kind of dry brushed some over the high spots on the board, and let this dry, then I went over the bottom with some Mod Podge and sprinkled some of the Epsom salts on. And the more of the Mod Podge that you put, the thicker you put your Mod Podge, of course, the more snow you're going to have. But I just sprinkled it until no more would stick. And then I just kind of shook that off. And once it's dry well, then I'll finish this whole thing off with a clear, and I think I used a matte finish on this one to seal in that bird and also to make sure that my snow doesn't go anywhere. Now here I am just dabbing some more paint so that that line doesn't look so precise. Now, I also thought this could use a little snow around the top, so I added some there. Now I'm back to this block, and what I envisioned for this one is a shelf sitter, but I want to use that little top there to mimic the trees in the background here. So I thought I would make just a little forest of trees on the top and maybe add a little sign that says trees for sale. So I'm using these little bottle brush trees, and this one I think I'll keep the same length. The others I'll need to cut so that I'll have various lengths. I hope the noises in the background aren't distracting to you guys, but I decided to go up to the property that we've been working on with my husband and sit and do my voiceover here. It's just such a beautiful day here in Tennessee, and I just thought it would be a shame to not enjoy this beautiful weather and God's beautiful creation. I just can't wait to get up here and work. And eventually I'm going to have a wood shop up here, so I'll be spending a lot of time here and maybe doing some filming on the property as well. Now these little bottle brush trees are very easy to add to the top. I just drilled some holes, and I'm making sure to kind of stagger those holes because I don't want it just to be trees lined up. I want it to look like a little miniature tree farm. And so what I'm doing is taking some of the needles and cutting them off the bottom so that I can make these different lengths. Now, I don't think I mentioned that after I drill these holes, I also put a little bit of hot glue down inside that hole and then stick these down in. I not only cut some of the needles from some of these to make them shorter, but I also used some little sprigs of greenery from some picks that I used to make smaller trees that were just somewhat different in color, just to add some variation to this. And I think even if you didn't have any bottle brush trees, you could probably get away with just little sprigs of greenery that are somewhat shaped like trees, even if you have to cut them to shape them like that. So I just kept adding these until I filled up most of that space on the top. I didn't want to crowd the ends too much. I just felt like that didn't look very natural. But I just glued those on and then left just enough space to take a little piece of cardstock and make a little tree farm sign that I glued onto a piece of skewer and then added that to the front. I also wrapped a piece of jute twine a couple times around the top and tied that in a knot just to add a little bit to the top of this board. You could also hang a hang tag from that or some other little item that you felt like went with this. But I just really love how this little tree farm turned out. Now this next one was the most simple one of all because I'm just making a riser out of this one. And I'm just going to take one of these transfers from IOD and I'm just going to put that on the front of this and use this as a riser. Then of course I'll have to add a top coat to seal that in. But before I added my top coat, I took my little finger sander and sanded around all the edges to kind of make them blend a little bit more, and I even sanded very lightly over the surface to help this adhere better and have a more natural look. And then of course I added the top coat. Now this next one I think I had the most fun creating. This is another little section from a landscape timber that's been painted and distressed. And this is another one of those from that Holly Glen collection that the bear was from. And I love this little bluebird on here, and it made me think of some little bluebirds that I have that I got a couple years ago, I think, at the Dollar General. And I've been making them over, but I want to keep it blue this time. I'm just going to make some changes to make it mimic the little bluebird that is on this transfer. And this is just the cutest little bluebird, and I don't get many opportunities other than cardinals to use birds in Christmas decor, but I think this will be perfect. So I'm just going to put this on the front, and then I will use my little finger sander and kind of burnish it in a little bit more. And then I'm going to add some decor to the top to bring this all together. And obviously this got sealed in with a top coat. And this is that little resin bird from the Dollar General. These were just $1. As you can see, the blue is a little too dark, but I can very easily make it go. The shape of the bird is not exact, but it's close enough. And when I do all the colors the way they need to be, this is just going to look so good together, I think. So using my transfer as a reference, I'm just kind of painting this up to match. And I'm just going to do kind of a haphazard white on the breast. And I'm going to use the burlap color because I want these whites to go together well. So I'll add that white on the breast. I should have had my picture more in frame here, but I'm just going to add some darker areas into the blue so that I will have the shading from that. And then once I get all my shading that I want in, I even do a little bit of shading in the off-white area there. But once I get enough of the shading, and I'm using brown for this. I think I'm using the color coffee bean, which is a very dark brown. And then once I get the shading that I want, and this doesn't have to be perfect, I'm just making sure to add a little here and there. And then once that dries well, then I'm going to finish this off with a white wax. And generally what you would do with a white wax is brush it on good and make sure you get it down in all the crevices and then wipe it off. And then the white would remain in all that detail, and that's how you make your detail pop. But in this case, I don't want the white down in the detail. What I want is I just want the white to change up the color of this blue. So what I'm going to do is just, when this is dry and ready, I'm going to take a brush and very lightly brush over the entire thing with the white wax. And I'm not going to put on so much that I have to wipe it off. And I'm going to put on a little at a time, that way I don't get too much. Now here's where I'm very lightly adding the white wax, only on the surface. So I'm using a soft brush so that I can just keep adding. And again, I'm just adding a little at a time. And if I add too much like I did right there, then I'll just kind of keep going over that with my dry brush, and that will remove some of this. But I love how this is changing it up, and it's making that blue go so well with the blue in the image. And I'll go over the whole thing, even the areas that I added dark to, and even the breast, because the breast is still going to need to be sealed. And this white wax will also act as a sealer. So if I had went over this with a white wax and let it get down in the crevices, I think it would have taken all this beautiful detail out. And by doing this, you'll have the deeper colors underneath, and then the lighter highlights over the top, and then of course all this blue is going to be changed somewhat in color. And I just really, when I got these, they're all blue except they had some cardinals, and to me they just didn't look very realistic at all. So and I didn't really care for the blue in them, but now after doing this to them, I really do like this blue. And I avoided putting the wax on the bottom of the bird so that I could glue it on the top of this little block. But I also wanted some greenery around the bottom of the bird. I didn't want to do too much because I didn't want to it to come upon the bird too much, but I wanted a little something to dress that top up. And so I just put some little sprigs of greenery. And with this one, I did think to paint the berries. So I had some white berries that I could add to this, and then I just added a little bit of blue paint on them. I just dry brushed a little bit of blue paint in them, and that's where I got the berries on this one. So I added this little greenery, some berries, and pine cones. And what I did on the greenery that I added to this one is I added some of the lighter colors of greenery in with it, also to pull out some of the colors in the greenery around the bird in the picture. So this one not only was my favorite to do, but I think the look of this one in the end, I like this one the best. Then I added those little painted berries in. So if you can find white berries, you'll have just any color of berry that you need. And then a pine cone here and there. And then this one was finished. I did add a hang tag to this one because I had a little verse that said, "Sing to the Lord." So I thought that went well with this little bird. Now this is a simple one that I did that I thought I was filming, but I wasn't. I just put the little pine cone transfers that came with the Cardinals. So I put that, just kind of wrapped it around the front and one side and the back. And then I drilled a hole in the top, added a bottle brush tree, and then I took some little baby pine cones and hot glued them here and there on the tree. And I thought this was a very simple but very elegant little tree. Now for this last little section of a landscape timber, I decided to make a pumpkin out of it. So I drilled a hole in the top and hot glued a little piece of driftwood, and that was my stem. And then I dry brushed some of the color Buttercream over the entire block. Then I dry brushed a little bit of a soft green around it here and there, and I didn't want to add much there because I want the primary color of this to be the Buttercream. And this, I think, is the color Weeping Willow from Dixie Belle. Then I did the same thing with a little bit of a warm orange, and this is a Dixie Belle color also called Terracotta. Then I took one of my stencils and stenciled just that little section there in the middle on the front of this, and I'm using Stazon ink instead of paint here. You could definitely use paint, and a little makeup brush that works really well for stenciling. I'll try to remember and add that in the description. And then I had some little bits and pieces from a transfer. I don't even know what set this was from, but it had a couple little pieces of wheat, and I added both of those to the bottom of this and tied on a little messy bow, and this one was finished. Now I said that was my last one, but I forgot this one last one, and this is just a 4x4 that is cut into probably about a 4-inch section, and it's already been painted. And now I'm just gonna put one of these transfers from the set, a Fairy Merry Christmas, and that's an IOD transfer, and I'm going to put one on each of the sides and just make this one a very simple little riser. And these are a almost perfect fit. All that I had to do was cut off the bottom of each of these, and then everything else fit almost perfectly on each side. So I put a different transfer on each side, and then once those were on, then I burnished those on with a little bit of sandpaper, and used my distress ink to distress around all the edges. And I also added some distressing to the top to keep it from being that brighter white. And now you could use this as just a little shelf sitter, or you could use it to put a candle or some little something on. I think even because there's so many little plants in this, I think it would be pretty as a small plant holder. I had so much fun making these, and it didn't take long at all to turn these little scraps of wood that would generally be thrown away into sellable items for my store. And most of these would be really good little gift ideas. And I think this time of year people start thinking about small gift ideas for co-workers or friends or teachers, and I think these are perfect. I hope you guys enjoy this video, and I hope to see you in the next. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great evening, and God bless you and your family.